All right, leading essentially into midterms, we're going to focus on just finishing out the semester, a little bit of more moss. You did some water, some rain rather, in the last lesson, which translates here. Let's see, in the VFX section. So slowly, um, we're getting into make our environment a little bit more realistic. And with that, we need to add more realistic shaders. We need to add more details and textures. And there's going to be another environment modeling class that's advanced than this. And in there, you'll build on these skills. Now we're going to create a shader that can be used for multiple, essentially growth. It's going to be primarily a Moss shader, but by the end of it, you'll know how to take any object. So for example, this pop machine or, a cube. And so let's go ahead and do Tools, Pro Builder Shape, for instance, and let's create a new shape. And we're just going to make a sphere here. And we're going to have our moss grow on top of this sphere. Now this sphere will also the moss what you're going to learn with this moss, you can have like snow grow on top. You can have the water, the rain that's coming down. You could have slowly like it's showing the specularity like starts to increase, and that'll show a shininess like rain's hitting the surface. And so we'll use that sphere. Maybe we'll transition over this pop machine or the house. And it's cool because over time you could show how a deterioration. So say in your game you have it deals with like at one point it's a child's history and the house is brand new and then they return as an adult and their house is overgrown with moss. This is an easy way of affecting that or doing this shader is an easy way of kind of showing age over time and without having to retexture everything. And this is kind of where we are now and where we're going in the future in respect to texture creation is a lot of shader work. All right, so we're going to create a new shader. Let's go to our art folder. Let's see, materials, shaders. And I'm going to create another folder in here. And you could call it like growing shaders if you decide to do the snow and all the other ones, which I suggest. But I'm just going to call this moss. And I'm going to right click in this folder. I'm going to go to create and then shader. And then yours could say URP shader, depending on what you do, but shader graph here. And then URP here. And then let's see, let's shader graph. And I'm going to call this moss shader graph. You have to forgive me. Everyone in the Margin household is under the weather. All right, as always, right click, create, and then material. And let's delete the first thing that says shader graph, and then we have moss shader graph. Or moss, well, we want moss material, but I'll just do MTRL. Let's drop this on our sphere. Oops, we want this one to be shader graph. I'll just change it to SG. And we'll change this one to material. There we go. Okay, so now we have our moss material on here. If for some reason you can't copy your moss material on here, you can always go up here, go to shader graphs, and then make sure you do moss shader graph, and that'll connect this moss shader graph to this moss material. All right, so like in the instance of this pop machine, we have this essentially this texture here. So what we're going to do is we're going to add that up. That's going to be one of the first things we create is a way to connect a texture to an object. So with your Moss SG selected, go ahead and click this edit button. And here we are. And I'm going to go ahead and close Pro Builder. So inside of here, we want a texture 2D, and I'll call this Space Map. And then we need a color that we're going to use just uniformly. So I'm going to go to color here and then do base color. And this could be what we use for a moss or whatever. Now with this texture 2D, if I drag this out and I connect this to the color here, the color slot. Oh, I'm sorry, we need a sampler texture 2D. This is what's going to load in that texture. And we connect this here. What happens is, notice I'm going to select this moss material here. If I hit save asset, you can see now we have that slot in which we can put in our pop machine texture or whatever. I don't remember. Yeah, soda machine. This I never renamed it from the texture I found on the internet, but I can like select that and then click that. Now that loads right into the shader, and Let's save this. Let's go back to our scene. Now you can see that texture is on here. So it's kind of like the same way of applying what this pop machine had by default, you know, because we had this LOD group. But that's what this slide is here, this very first one. It just a little bit more expanded. You can use some stuff inside of Shader Graph to shrink this down so it's not so big. This is kind of an older way of the way Unity used to do things. And we also have this base color, but it's not wired to anything. Because it's just sitting here. So anytime you add something, it appears in your Shader Graph. Now what I want to do is tint this using that base color. So I'm going to drag base color in. And we've done this before, and it's okay if you forgot, but what you'll notice with coding and a lot of this stuff, game development, character modeling, all that stuff, is there's so much repetition that you shouldn't worry too much if you don't get it the first try or it seems too confusing, because you're going to be doing the same thing so over and over and over again that it does become redundant. And so not to be afraid of this kind of stuff. All right, so right now I have it set to white, so there is no tint, but as I move this around, you can see we're tinting it. And really all it's doing is it's tinting the white areas. I guess a little bit of the other ones too. So it's just multiplying that color on top. You know, let's make sure to save that. So let's just by default set our base color to white, because say you're working on a team and you go to push this out through Perforce or any other program, by default, it'll automatically set it to white so it won't mess up the scene. Okay, so let's not make this a pop machine for now. Let's see if there's a rock or something, because we could show how we add rock to, or moss to this rock. I'm gonna hit F to focus. Now this is realistic, and the moss that we're gonna create is gonna be a simple noise. So it might not, the moss might not look as real, but we could tweak it again later or in class or something so that we get something that looks a little bit more like this. But so now we have a rock and it's got a stone texture. And let me go ahead and delete this cube out and this lightning VFX that I was doing for another lecture. All right, now that I remember I was telling you that this is like an awesome shader that could be used maybe for snow or whatever. So there's this option in here called categories, and they built it just for stuff like this, where I can type in like moss specs or something. And in this moss specs here, everything underneath it, everything underneath this could be all the stuff that relates to moss, and then you could just dock it. And what's nice about this is if you have snow specs, anything else, you know, like water rain specs, you can keep it in line there. It's like categorizing it essentially. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just pause the video, and I'm going to create 3 more variables, a color amount and an accumulation size. All right, so pay special attention because this is going to do with the moss specs that of the data type. This is going to hold the color. This one's is the amount of moss that's on there, and then how the moss grows. And these are both floats, and this is a color. All right, so for the color as a default, we don't want to do white or black for this particular one because it's moss. We'll go with something that matches sort of that muddy green that was on the stone. The amount, we're going to go with a slider, and this will give us a nice slider to go across, and we want it to be between 0 and 1, the slider, and the default to be 100%, so we see our moss right away. And then accumulation size, let's do 15, and this is just because these are just generic values that you're going to be able to tweak. Remember, in our scene, when we select our stone, we have moss specs here. See how we could dock that? And that's color. And all that stuff. It's surprising that it defaulted to black instead of the color here. Interesting. Maybe when we wire it up, it'll correct itself. All right, so down here, grab your accumulation size and then drag it out and then connect that to a simple noise. And let's play with that size a little bit. Oh, the reason it's not working is, so this is a trick that you should know, is when you drag this out and you type simple noise, it gives you 2 options, the UV or the scale. We want to connect that to the scale. All right, so we have this amount here, and what this is going to do is we'll multiply this,
because we have accumulation size here, which is going to control the size of our noise here. And then we connect our amount. Now we can control the amount and the scale. And then let's actually rename this to MOS color. I mean, I know it's redundant because it says MOS specs, and we see MOS specs inside of here it's right here in the category. But just, so we'll do the MOS color here, and then we do another multiply, and we'll make this slot A, and we click that here. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter what direction you multiply. 2 times 2 is 4, whether this is the 2 or this is the 2. So let's save that. All right, so how do we, for instance, like show MOS growing on our pop machine? Well, we can use a lerp node for this. And remember, that has an alpha value of 0 to 1. So I'm going to show you that really quick. So let's go ahead and grab a lerp node. And we've used these before, but notice that this A says 0 here. And what that means is the texture will show fully if this value in T is set to 0. And then this one, if it's set to 1, you'll see MOS. So let's go ahead and demo that really quick. And let's go ahead and just create like a tester node here for our lerp value. And actually what we can use is, let's bring this up a little bit. We can use our amount again and just wire that in here and then save it. And if we go to our scene here, and I think what I'm going to do is grab my MOS material and just drop it on this pop machine, and then actually just change this to the pop machine thing. I really need to, soda is how it starts, but here's our soda machine, right? And we'll just use this as kind of our example. So if we take amount and we move it all the way to the right, notice the whole thing turns that mossy color, right? And if we move it to the left, it turns back to the Coca-Cola color. So we're going to do, we can actually change accumulation size a little bit and change the amount here. And we might have to edit this a little bit, but anyway, bringing it back to 0. So we'll actually focus on this and not the sphere. I mean, it doesn't hurt, but what I guess a good example with the sphere is, notice as I change the sphere here, it changes both, and we have to kind of create a new material for each one, but they could both have the MOS on it. So let me show you what I mean by that. So say you wanted all objects, like for example, this pop can has let's see, where's the materials at? Here's materials here. Oh, we have a separate materials, which is interesting. I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to call this soda machine material. And then you could obviously create a house material if you wanted to, and then have it only affect certain parts of the house. So I'm going to grab soda machine material now. I'm going to drop it on the soda machine here. And it has that inside of there. And then now this one has the MOS material. See that? And I could actually change this to a rock. And they have the same parameters. Change this texture to a rock. This rock texture, for example. Oh, I don't know why I didn't put it in there. Oh, because this is I think it's like an LOD material. There we go. This one's fine. So just briefly, if I change the amount of this one, it now doesn't affect it because our materials are different, right? We have two different materials. We have one for a soda machine material, and we have another one. Where is? Sorry. And I would actually put that soda machine material inside of the soda folder, for the model. But just for now, this is like a soda machine MOS material. And this one affects differently than the other one. Let's move this over too in case we decide to use this. And also, if we look at this accumulation size is pretty tiny. So if we change this to something like 600 and we move it all the way to our MOS, you can see we start to get more of that MOS texture as we adjust it. See that? And we had it set pretty low. So let's say 300. That looks pretty good. But what we need it to do is kind of take on the shape of MOS growing on the surface. and maybe at a specific angle, like maybe the moss is growing from the top or something, versus what we see now, which is just all over. All right, so let's group these together. This is our base map. And then this is all our this is for our actual moss. So I'm gonna hit Control G, call this moss. And you could right click with a bunch of nodes selected and then do the grouping. Select the grouping. And I think I'm gonna throw this lerp in here too. Hold Shift, I'm clicking on both titles, or Control rather, and I can move this around. Alright, so let's go ahead and add two floats, a noise size and a edge distance. And what these are going to do, and I'm going to put them in here, they're going to deal with the size of the size of essentially the where it's going to grow out from, as well as the distance from the edge of the object. So like it can grow from either towards the center of the pop machine or the rock. And what we'll do here is we'll take noise size, put it next to, we'll keep all of our sizes together. Let's take noise size and replace accumulation size. Let me delete that. We'll use accumulation size to control how big it is across the entire surface, where noise size will be the size of the actual noise itself. So for noise, I think we saw that 300 was good. So I'm going to make that by default 300. And then I'm going to save this. And we could now test noise size and make that 300. And now when we move this, it should give us the same result, which it does. Also right now we could delete amount, and the reason for that is because we're going to lerp based on no longer between 0 and 1 in the sense of what we're doing here, but we're going to be doing it based on these new sets of node that we create, and that's going to let it grow out across the surface. You'll see in a moment. Alright, so let's grab our simple noise here. I'm going to copy that, and I'm just going to paste it down here. Let's delete this. And this is where we're going to use our accumulation size. Now what you'll notice is within this, it's kind of foggy. In some areas it's a little bit jaggy. So what we can do is we can use a smooth step node. And we'll do smooth step edge. And what this does is, and we're going to use this as the in and not the edge distance. And you'll notice right off the bat, it makes it much deeper. The colors, like the blacks are much deeper, and it's a lot smoother. And that's why we use a smooth step. Alright, so let's decrease. I'm just going to collapse this so the size is a little smaller. And let's focus on creating these edges. We're going to bring amount, and we're going to have it go to a 1 minus node. And we'll dial that into edge 1. So what this is doing is it really, it's a function in Unity that's like, it simply outputs the value of 1 minus the input value. So that's whatever we put in from amount here. And it's essentially what it's doing is it's inverting the input. So if you're feeding in like 0.5, for example, it'll be 1 minus 0.5. So the output would be essentially, 1 minus 0.5, which is 0.5. And this makes it useful for inverting colors or other values in material or texture. So that's why we use this. All right, so once we have that value, what we're going to do is we're going to grab our edge distance here, and we're just going to add those together. And actually, let's just, for readability, let's take these two, put them up here, and connect them to the top. And then this will be connected to the second option. Alright, so for edge distance, maybe by default we set it to 0.2. Save that, and then we connect this to that lerp that we talked about earlier. And that should give us a lot smoother results. And this is pretty big, the noise size here. I mean, that's what we were using it for, so it's pretty good. All right, let's make sure you save that and then go back into our scene. And now you'll see something that's a little different. As we lower the amount, it starts to dissolve and it starts to look like more like moss across the surface. This one's UVs might be a little screwed up, but we also don't have an edge distance. So let's make this 0.2 here. Adjust our accumulation size. There we go. Now it looks more like moss. Kind of starting to grow on the surface of an object. So this is also what they do in games when they're trying to, again, make things look, you can animate this either in code or you can have an animator animate it, and just over time you could see that the machine gets overrun by moss, which is kind of cool. And remember, we have like, not just that, we have accumulation size, so we can bring this down or up, and you can make it as big as you like depending on the look of your game, you know? And also there's this color here, right? So if we change the moss color to white, now you're getting something like dirty snow. So and if you remember, like if we go to our edge distance here, we have it set to 0, right? Let me hit F to focus on this. If we bring this up, notice how soft it needs to be a lot. Maybe I'll make this a slider, but like 0.1, 0.5, you'll see that the distance becomes a lot softer, right? And if I play with this accumulation size here, you know, maybe 0.05, yeah, it starts to really soften that edge. All right, so let's play with that strength a little bit because you can see the edge distance is a little strong. So I'm going to hit plus and I'm going to add another category called noise strength. And I'm going to drag this into my moss specs area underneath size. All right, and this is all going to happen inside of essentially our moss color area. So let me kind of move this out a little bit here. So I'm going to grab my noise strength node, drop it inside of here. And then what I'm going to do is map this to a 1- node. Let's kind of move these down a little bit. And this is going to go into a remap node. Actually, we'll take our simple noise into a remap node. And this should really be in our in and not our out. So now you can see the value there. Let's break this too. And I want this to affect I'm going to use a vector 2. We're going to have it affect the x-axis. So vector 2, second one x. And then I'm going to connect that to the out here. I should leave this open so you can see that happening. And this is all just to clean up that edge. All right, let's connect our remap node now to this multiply here. So this should give us really a 0 to 1. And I think that looks pretty good. Let's test it. So if we increase our noise strength here, notice it's like completely black, or if we move it to the left, it adjusts the color like that. And actually the reason we're getting a little bit of that things not disappearing but the color being funny is I wanted to go from 0 to 1 here because these give us essentially whatever value in here. Remember, we essentially invert that value and then we're plugging it into the x, which goes out here. So this should give us a different result, the result we're looking for. So if I take my noise strength, yeah, now we're getting that color value there that we're looking for, either completely black or. So if we make our noise strength 0, we're not going to see pretty much any noise. It's completely set to 0. If we set it to 1, actually it looks like it's inverting. 1, we're not seeing any noise, and then 0, it's fully visible there. So let's actually go in there and also change our noise strength to a slider. That might make it a little bit easier. So if we play with this slider now, we can see it makes it a little easier for them to control it. This is the size of our noise. And then this is the size of the accumulation of it on our surface. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And then this is really just the amount that's on the surface of the object. So we're getting there. All right, so I'm going to set my noise strength to, I guess 0 is the way to go. Let's see. And then just increase my accumulation size. And then, let's see. And then this stuff right here, Control G, MOS size. This kind of controls the MOS size. So it looks like I have my caps lock on, MOS size. Save that. And let's see also if